Hello everyone, welcome to Final Fantasy XIV Beginner's Guide. Today I'll be finishing my 3-part guide to playing DPS by talking about the range physical role. But I'll be talking about some specifics to help you play better. I won't be going too in depth about each job specifically. You may have clicked on this video because you are curious about how to play a physical range DPS. You probably clicked because you wanted to hear some info about all three of them. Either way, I'm here to try my best and give you the proper information. For clarity's sake, I will be referring to physical range DPS as range DPS, but don't confuse them with casters. This video will most likely be extremely short, as there is not a lot of things that I can say about range DPS without actually going into details. As much as I'd like to do that, this is simply a beginner's guide, meaning only the basic tips for newbies will be mentioned. If you do finish this video and you want more, then I suggest heading over to the Balance Discord server where you can find extremely in-depth guides about every single job that I've talked about in these videos. Now that we got out of the way, I'll start off by saying that out of all roles, the range DPS jobs are the most different when compared to each other. I'll talk about them by putting them on an RNG spectrum line. On the left side, we'll put Machinist because it has the most static rotation with no procs, but on the right side, I'll put Dancer which has a lot of random procs in its rotation. In the middle we have Bard, which is a bit of both, a strict rotation but kept fresh by random procs. Even though the gameplay of range DPS feels sameish, it rotates around a different mechanic for each job. Bard has to keep dots up and always have songs on, Dancer has to keep dancing at set intervals to keep up their buff while checking their procs and seeing which ones they should prioritize, and Machinists have to keep an eye on their gauges to not overcap. Until Shadowbringers, we only had Bard and Machinist. Bard was considered the de facto support job, but with the introduction of Dancer, it lost some of that utility. While Bard is still considered one, more or less, Dancer is literally designed around giving damage to someone else through the skill close position or Dance Partner as it's more commonly called. Giving someone Dance Partner gives a copy of your certain buffs that you gain through using skills to your partner. An example would be the damage buff from your standard step or the crit buff from Devilment. You also gain something from your partner in the form of SP for your gauge. In terms of raiding, I would be brave enough to say that range DPS are the easiest to get into endgame with. The freedom of movement and range makes them great for a beginner that wants to try out Savage and doesn't feel comfortable enough with any other role. That's not to say range DPS don't have their own difficulties to deal with, mainly in terms of rotation optimization. To start off with some basic tips, my first and most important tip is getting used to your abilities and their placement on the hotbar. The only way you'll be able to do your rotation on the move is if you know where your buttons are and when to press them by instinct. Otherwise, you'll end up standing still and possibly getting hit by a mechanic or wiping your group. You always want to be pushing buttons even when running around. Fair warning if you do plan on taking a range DPS into endgame content. If there's a mechanic where a ranged or a caster DPS has to bait something, most of the time the range DPS is the one that baits, so make sure you're prepared for that responsibility. Another tip, one that I've previously mentioned in the caster DPS guide too, is staying close to the healers. Even though you're ranged and have freedom of movement, those 2 perks of range DPS won't actually help you if you're dead on the floor because you are out of healing range. Make sure you never stay too far away from your group except if a mechanic calls for it. In dungeons, your position also matters for your AoE skills. Bard and Machinist AoE skills are cones, while Dancers are AoEs around them. Let's talk about range DPS role actions. There are 6 of them in total and 2 of them are similar to the ones that melee have. I'll talk about leg graze and foot graze first. To be honest, I'll be extremely blunt when I say that they're basically useless in anything that's not open world content. You'll never need to use these in dungeons or raids, especially on bosses. You can put these on your bars or not, it's your choice. Next up we got Second Wind. It's a quick burst of self-healing tied to a 120 second cooldown timer. It won't replace a healer, but it will definitely help you out in a pinch if you need a quick pick-me-up for surviving a mechanic. Arm's length is functionally identical to the melee one. You use it to prevent a knockback or getting pulled by the boss. This saves your life, so make sure you have it readily available if you need it. Peloton is the range DPS iconic role action. It's a speed buff for yourself and your party, but sadly it's useless in combat. It's useful in dungeons, however, when running from place to place, but it tends to be pretty useless for normal raids because you cannot use it in combat. Head graze is a somewhat niche role action. It works the same as a tank interject, except it's a ranged interrupt instead of one that requires you to be in melee range. I'm saying it's niche because there's not a lot of mechanics where you have to interrupt. They have been present, especially in the 2nd Eden late tier, but we don't know when they'll appear again. Other utility all 3 range DPS have is their party mitigation in the form of Troubadour, Tactician and Shield Samba. Functionally, they all work the same, but they all have a different look. They are on a 3-minute cooldown, they last for 15 seconds and they give 10% damage reduction to those around you, including yourself. Keep in mind, however, that if you have another range DPS, you should discuss where each of you uses their own mitigation, because these override each other. They do not stack, so using both would be a waste of a defensive. I'll be completely honest and say that there was more that I would have wanted to say as a general tip for you guys, but as I said earlier, until you actually get into optimizing your gameplay, there's not really much to it when talking about the core aspects of a range DPS. This is also where I'll be wrapping up my role guides, at least the ones for Shadowbringers, and the next one will be about Blue Mage, after which I'll make various random videos. I'll be trying to make one video per week until Endwalker. If you enjoyed watching this video, give it a like, and if you want to stay up to date and watch videos as soon as they're out, maybe subscribe too. This would really help, and that's all from me now, so take care.